Why are Afro-Guyanese being deliberately excluded from the country's oil and gas riches? Why is it that descendants of Indian indentured laborers control Guyana's booming economy and politics? And why does this community harbor such deep racial hatred and contempt for Black Guyanese? The sad reality is that in the midst of Guyana's fast-growing economy and oil wealth, African Guyanese face utter marginalization in all sectors, mass unemployment through racially biased layoffs and terminations from the public sector, racial bias in hiring in the private sector, racial discrimination in the award of contracts, oil blocks, banking licenses, access to investment capital, access to land for farming and commercial ventures, and dramatic reduction or closure of training programs traditionally utilized by African Guyanese as the path to employment and financial security. A little known fact, viewers, is that because of Guyana's new oil and gas sector, the Indian-dominated ruling party PPP is openly and ruthlessly pursuing the Indianization of Guyana, supported by the Modi government of India. As a result, the current administration demonstrates cold indifference to the historic contributions of African Guyanese whose slave ancestors built Guyana long before the Indian migrants showed up. The undisputed fact is that it is African slaves who built modern-day Guyana. The British colonial government confirmed this fact in the 1948 Venn Commission report, which stated that, and I quote, "It was Africans who had driven back the sea and had cleared, drained, and reclaimed 15,000 square miles of forests and swamps. This is equivalent to 9 million acres of land. In short, all the fields on which the sugar estates are now based were cleared, drained, and irrigated by black slave labor. All the plantations now turned into villages and cities were built by unpaid African labor. In the process of building these plantations, careful research has shown that Africans installed the following. Number one, 2,580,000 miles of drainage canals, trenches, and interbed drains. Number two, 3,500 miles of dams, roads, and footpaths. Number three, 2,176 miles of sea and river defense. The Venn Commission also reported that, and I quote, to build the coastal plantation alone, a value of 100 million, that is 1 billion tons of earth had to be moved by the hands of African slaves without machinery. The United Nations and other international organizations have expressed concern about Guyana's racially polarized society and discrimination against Afro-Guyanese through reports of such experts as Doudou Diène, the UN Special Rapporteur on contemporary forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. During his fact-finding trip to Guyana, he observed that, and I quote, every level of Guyanese society is permeated by a profound moral, emotional, and political fatigue arising out of the individual and collective impact of ethnic polarization. Gay McDougall, The United Nations expert on minority issues made a similar conclusion to Doudou Diène by stating that due to, and I quote, corrosive racial politics, the harsh reality in Guyana is one of ethnic polarization among Guyanese of African, Indian, and indigenous descent. The UN Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent in their 2017 report provided 66 recommendations to improve the situation, but the reality on the ground tells a different story. The situation deteriorated dramatically in 2020 due to the interference by the United States government of Guyana's election, resulting in the removal from office of a multiracial coalition under which African Guyanese could see a path to a more equitable and humane society. The current administration, led by the predominantly Indian People's Progressive Party, came into office just as the American oil giant Exxon began oil production. Ever since, the government has solidified the Indian domination of the public and private sectors, which started during its 23-year rule from 1992 to 2015, to the complete exclusion of African descendants. For over 400 years, Guyana has had a history of anti-African discrimination and hateful, racist public policies by Dutch, British, and now Indian-controlled Guyanese governments. With the passage of the Abolition of Slavery Act in 1838 by the British colonial government, the white slave owners were generously compensated for their loss of property. By contrast, the African slaves were released without any land or compensation for the free labor they had contributed for over 200 years. Let us contrast this with how Indian immigrant laborers who replaced the African slaves on the sugar plantations were treated. In 1838, Guyana had a population of only 98,000, but by 1917, over 500 ships docked into Guyana carrying 240,000 indentured Indian immigrants. Very few of them ever returned to India. Instead, the vast majority accepted free government land and settled in Guyana. And the government was generous indeed, as you will see. For starters, each Indian was given free land of 2 acres, then an additional 2 acres plot per child over 10 years of age, and half an acre per child under 10. And that is not all. The immigrants also received half an acre to build a house. This is, of course, in addition to their monthly salaries and benefits. But where does all the Indians' racial contempt for black people come from? A key explanation for the intense hatred of Indo-Guyanese towards black Guyanese is Hindu nationalism. Not only does the current PPP government of Guyana have strong ties to the Modi administration of India, but it relies on Indians' contempt and scorn of Africans, who are seen as the lowest caste outcasts in the Hindu religion, to maintain political power by driving a racial wedge in Guyanese society. The Hindu religion's grounded sense of social hierarchy, along with its prejudice against blackness and an instinctive negative perception of Africans, is a source of anti-African racism in Guyana. Another key explanation for the racial oppression of Afro-Guyanese is the government's shocking and secret implementation of the Indian colonization of Guyana scheme, first proposed in 1919. Under this scheme, prominent Indians in Guyana and the British Guyana government offered India the colony of British Guyana to become a colony of India. This British Guyana colonization scheme initially targeted many areas for settlement by Indian immigrants. Today, all these areas are occupied mainly by their descendants. It is clear from this that the British Guyana colonization scheme by India has largely been implemented in secret. The drilling of oil and gas has hastened the full implementation and unveiled the successful accomplishment of the colonization scheme. While representing 39% of the Guyanese population, Indians now own and control 85% of Guyana's economy. With respect to the distribution of land, 9 Amerindian tribes receive approximately 19% of Guyana's land through the Amerindian Act of 2006. This is a bitter irony to the descendants of African slaves because 3 out of the 9 Amerindian tribes, namely the Waiwais, the Makuchis, and the Wapishanas, came to Guyana approximately 100 to 200 years after African slaves were brought to Guyana. Another sad reality is that African Guyanese, who are 29% of the population, own less than 7% of the nation's wealth. They are therefore demanding their legitimate claim to the 18% of Guyana which their ancestors reclaimed from the sea and made economically viable as enslaved persons, and where 500,000 of them lost their lives. Yet unbelievably, both Indians and Amerindians are fighting this just and moral claim. Despite these challenges, the Afro-Guyanese community remains resilient. They continue to look to the United Nations and people of goodwill all over the world to bring global attention to these racial injustices that are leading to the very real threat of complete marginalization and displacement of their community. We hope that this video brings global attention to their plight and the urgent need for change in Guyana. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe to our channel for more stories that matter. Together we can amplify the voices of the oppressed and work towards a more just and equitable world. Thank you.